All right, today we're jumping into a really interesting topic, the new price of I do in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to explore why that big decision to get married seems to be less about romance these days and a whole lot more about your bank account. Let's get into it.
So here's the big question, and I bet this one hits close to home for a lot of you. Is that classic middle-class dream, the house, a couple of cars, starting a family, is that becoming a luxury item, something you just hope for, instead of something you can actually plan for?
And what's fascinating is that the answer seems to have less to do with culture and a whole lot more to do with cost. This isn't about some big cultural shift or a moral decline. Nope. It's being framed as a totally rational economic decision. People are just adapting to a new financial world.
Okay, so let's get into the data on this delay. We're going to follow the numbers to see what's really going on.
Just take a look at this chart. The average age for men to get married for the first time, it's shot up to nearly 32. And for women, it's just over 29. I mean, this isn't happening by accident. People are consciously waiting, making sure they're financially stable before they even think about walking down the aisle. It's like financial security has become this new unwritten rule for getting married.
And there's another layer to this caution. When you see that about 30 out of every 100 marriages end in divorce, well, that's a pretty significant number. It adds a whole other level of risk to the equation. So younger people are looking at that and thinking, okay, I need to be really sure, which makes that financial foundation even more important. It's a serious calculation.
So all of this leads us to this really key idea, something called the aspiration gap. This is where the dream of what life should be like really clashes with reality.
So what is this aspiration gap? Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's that giant gulf between the ideal middle-class life we all see on TV, the one we're told to strive for, and what our paychecks actually say we can afford. And it's this exact tension, this gap, that's making people hit the brakes on huge life decisions, like getting married.
Okay, so let's try and put some real numbers to this dream. When you add it all up, a mortgage, payments and maintenance on 2 cars, groceries, utilities, and all the costs that come with having kids, what's the magic number? Well, the total comes out to roughly 19,600 Trinidad and Tobago dollars every single month.
And this is where the math gets pretty scary. That ideal cost is about dollars 19,600 a month. But the average dual-income household, they're bringing in around dollars 19,000 a month, and that's before taxes. I mean, the margin for error is razor thin, if it even exists at all. For so many people, the only way to achieve that dream is to start their life together deep in debt.
So faced with this massive financial squeeze, what are people doing? Well, they're not just throwing their hands up in the air, they're adapting. They're coming up with new strategies for this new economy.
And it looks like 2 widespread adaptations are really taking hold. The first one is something called the silent bailout, and the second is something we see all the time, widespread cohabitation.
Okay, this idea of a silent bailout is fascinating. What it really means is all the young adults who are living with their parents, sometimes well into their 20s and 30s. It's this informal, unspoken financial subsidy. Their parents are basically absorbing the massive cost of housing, which kind of masks just how tough it is out there for the younger generation.
Now, this brings up a huge question. As society adapts and things like living together become the norm, is the legal system actually keeping up? This is where we run into a pretty big conflict, where the law seems to be lagging way behind real life.
To be fair, the law has tried to evolve. If you look back, you see laws from the colonial era. But then in 1998, we got the Cohabitational Relationship Act. And this was a really big deal. It gave legal recognition and crucial protections, like property rights, to heterosexual couples who were living together. It was a huge step in acknowledging how people were actually forming families.
But that's where the progress kind of stalls. Because for heterosexual couples living together, there's a clear legal path to certain rights, but for same-sex couples, it's a completely different story. They face a legal dead end. And a big reason for that is these old, protected, colonial-era laws that are still on the books.
So what's the specific roadblock here? It's something called the Savings Law Clause. Now, the easiest way to think about this is like a constitutional bubble that protects old laws from the colonial era. It basically freezes them in time, shielding them from being challenged, even if they go against our modern ideas of fundamental rights. It's a massive barrier to updating the laws.
And it's not just this one legal clause. There are other big systemic roadblocks that keep people from getting ahead. For starters, housing costs are often tied to the energy sector, which can price everybody else out of the market. Then you have the financial sector basically stepping in to bridge that aspiration gap with debt.
And you even have policies that create these weird cliff edges where if you earn just a little bit more money, you suddenly lose a ton of support, which can trap you right where you are.
Okay, so we've looked at the numbers, the economics, and the law. What's next? What does all this mean for the future of the family?
I think the most important takeaway here is this quote. These aren't individual failures, but systemic issues, creating a gap between aspiration and reality. You know, it's crucial to understand that these trends, people waiting to get married, living with their parents longer, it's not because they're failing. It's a perfectly logical response to a system that's made the traditional dream really, really hard to reach.
And so, that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. Are these new family structures we're seeing, or is this just a retreat from an ideal that has become unattainable for so many? Are we building something new, or are we just giving up on the old dream? That's a deep one to think about.